The latest StatsSA figures indicate 51% of South Africa's population is women. Only 45% of these women are active participants in the economy. Well, that's according to the Commission on the Status of Women in South Africa. Now, Pelisa Nkomo, an economist, joins us in studio to talk about that issue and more. Good evening, Pelisa. Thanks very much for your time. And this is something I asked two of my guests who were here yesterday. And it is that we've been talking about this. These numbers aren't surprising at all. Everyone from companies that are listed in the stock exchange to small SMMEs, everyone agrees that this is what needs to be done. But it's just not happening.
Yes. I mean, look, in the context of South Africa, I think we have actually we've covered a little bit of a ground. And part of it had to do with the fact that we've established employment equity, so there's a regime in terms of labor market recruitment. But fundamentally, there are 4 to 5 issues that you need to address to be able to have women to be active in the economy. Then the first one, we need to be able to deal with the social norms, because in essence, how women are viewed in society and their participation in the economy is very important, right? So as
those myths have been debunked. I mean, you've had like sterling women leading organizations, companies, in government, everywhere you go. So, I mean,
they've not been debunked. In fact, for example, interestingly, the UN Women actually has done a study where it was looking at all the regulation regime in South Africa, and it actually proved that 82% of South African regulatory is transformational, meaning that it supports women's participation across sectors. So what happens to the other 18%?
Exactly. And I'm saying the few that we have seen have actually performed.
Yes.
That's what I mean by saying those myths have been.
Yes, but I think you also need to look at different other things. I think the other issue is access to finance for women to be able to participate in business, right? For example, evidence suggests that women once they actually secured a loan, they're actually able to pay back. But as long as we actually put up so much inhibitors, one, and say, you need to present a collateral for you to have access to finance, or you actually increase cost of capital. I think the issue around access to land, the issue of land is a factor of production, and it's such an important asset, right? So what happens is that if women don't have access to land where they can participate either in the fruit production, for example. So in essence, what you see where women are in terms of exclusion is also a reflection of what's happening generally in the outlook of our own economy. Because then you can't exclude women in terms of class, but as well in terms of race. Because it actually speaks to the fact that women's opportunities, they have to fight all the time for them to actually gain access.
Are those who have the ability to do something about the situation actually doing what you're saying needs to be done? In other words, if you have in the ANC, for example, a leader of society, as the ANC always reminds us. Did you see that coming through during the hearings? We saw, around expropriation, land expropriation without compensation, for example. In other words, was that agenda embedded in the conversations or issues that were raised by such powerful structures? No,
absolutely. I mean, look, if you look at the ANC manifesto, I think they've articulated very well the role of women in food production, but also dealing with issues of food security and access. But at the same time, to look at what opportunities that exist for women. But it's true that you can always set up a very grand policy regime, but ultimately everything else is actually around execution, right? But there are two things that I think are very important as well, because the more you have weaker voices of women, because also women over the years, women's movement has actually been polarized and become quite weak. So in essence, it means that actually you don't have a collective voice, because that collective voice, it's what actually going to be able to say. So let's look at the sectors of the economy. Why do we have such high masculine toxicity in certain sectors? Mining sector is actually dominated. If you go into transport industry, it's still dominated by men. If you go into construction sector, it's still dominated by men. But of course, because one thing is policy, but the other one is implementation, and the next one is actually monitoring. But also you need much more robust institutions that are able to say on an annual basis or even biannual and say, we have covered this ground and this was happening. In fact, part of what the population growth report actually says, it says African black women, young women, actually are more caught into poverty, but also it means that if they're in poverty, it means they have no access to income, but as well as it also means that they are trapped into social inequality. And the opportunity we're missing is that once you increase access to women in terms of income, for example, you profoundly contribute to gender equity, but as well as into income distribution. And I think one of the key things that we've seen from the population report, actually, which says it's very clear, and even unemployment report, is that you see that you only have actually less than 5 million people employed, and bigger group of women are actually in the informal sector. So the point we're making is then political appetite to support women in the informal sector, and my answer is actually probably no.
And of course,
we've not had a very concrete plan and say, how do we draw in women who are in the informal sector? Because what women do, as soon as they lose their job or they have to leave work because they have to take care of someone who's not well, amongst the key things that they go straight into the informal sector. And as long as you don't provide a proper safety net, for example, we need to be able to have capital that has appetite for risk, give grants to women and look at them and coordinate them. Amongst those is that we must support cooperatives. So everybody else would say, oh no, the cooperative system has failed. But it has failed because, one, we've not actually ensured that there's a better social facilitation. Because you can't introduce people to money where, in fact, they don't know what are they going to be eating at night, right? But you must be able to actually develop a very clear ecosystem and say, we will provide you with the technical support, we will provide you with the basics of how to run a business. But at the same time, how do you use your collective power to be able to build both your local economies? For example, you look at everyone else today, even if they have a small piece of land, they still take a taxi to go and buy food outside. Why don't we promote local foods market so that people can buy next to each other? The second issue, if you look at the school nutritional program, it's actually a public procurement program, which actually we have a huge opportunity to leverage over there. And you can organize women and say, if this group can produce certain commodities, you have carrots, you have potatoes, and so women are going to can actually be able to do that. But as long as we have a risk-averse public procurement system, which in fact could have such transformative outcome to deal with issues of inclusivity of women within the economy, we're still going to continue to have this kind of conversation.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you
for coming through.